Sneakers and Cleats, the podcast.
Welcome back to the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It is Thursday, November 21st. This is episode 152, very special edition of the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. Today we're talking all Project Marvel as it was debuted and unveiled today at San Antonio City Council. Don Harris in between shows joining us on the News 4 side. Chuck Miketinac joining us on the Fox SA side. Me, I was at Council today and got to hear everyone's gripes and I guess happiness with it. So let's get into it, guys. No pleasantries needed. We all saw each other on Monday, so I think we're all good. So Project Marvel laid out today by Eric Walsh, the San Antonio city manager, Lori Houston, the assistant city manager, Mayor Ron Nirenberg, mayor of San Antonio, and basically it's a $3 to $4 billion entertainment and sports district in downtown San Antonio. The ITC is basically where the Spurs arena will be. Luis, you can go ahead and throw up that VO if you want. This is an artist rendering of it. It's certainly impressive. You guys, I want you to get your initial thoughts on it before we get into some of the questions that I think the presentation today still left behind. Don, I'll start with you since you were kind of on a time crunch with you.
I don't think it surprises anybody, right? I think we knew that all of these elements were happening. You know, the ITC had been sold by UTSA or is in the works, and they're working on demolishing it this spring, and everybody knew this was going to happen. It's been kind of behind closed doors on the actual details of it, and I didn't know certain aspects of it. I didn't know about the John Wood courthouse becoming a theater. I thought the land bridge, I had heard rumblings of that, but that was ambitious. To see it all in an artist's rendering about what the future could look like is breathtaking. I don't think anybody looks at that and says, wow, that's not very good or not very ambitious. And that's what we were told going into this thing. That's what I was told over the last couple of days. People told me, wait till you see it. You're not going to be disappointed. You're not going to say, wow, they didn't go big enough. And it's true. They went big. And I don't know that all of it will be completed. It's 9 different separate projects. And that could mean 9 different separate funding models. And that could be so many different things. But I'm pretty confident that the convention center and the Spurs arena get built. And even if the dome renovation doesn't end up looking like that, even if the John Wood Theater doesn't happen, I do feel confident those first 2 major pieces can and will get done.
Chuck?
Yeah, I mean, looking at the specs for this, it is something to behold, right? I mean, I know my first impression was, wow, that's amazing. Sign me up for that right now, right? But now we've got to look and see, okay, this is a bold, ambitious plan. It's going to completely reshape downtown and take San Antonio through the next 2 decades, assuming it all comes to pass. And now, what is it going to look like? How do we get there? How does this go from just being a bunch of plans on a piece of paper to now getting all the finances in order to get something like this to happen? So, you know, I have a lot of questions too, just like a lot of people on this. And, you know, it's going to be interesting to see how this all comes together, because there's not a lot of talk about the finances right now, right? Today was just a presentation.
Definitely
this
not
is
a lot
what
of
it looks like.
on that, yeah.
Right. So, you know, how can you make a judgment on whether you think this is going to do this or this is going to happen? It's almost impossible, as I sit here, for me to be able to weigh in on one side and down the other. I mean, if some of this has been done behind the scenes with a lot of non-disclosure agreements or behind the scenes, we've heard rumblings, but in terms of publicly, how is this going to look? And then the ask at some point is believed to be that they are going to go to the taxpayer and ask to foot at least a portion of this monstrosity, right? Is there going to be an appetite for that, like there was in '99 when they were building the AT&T Center? I have no idea. I mean, this is literally like first day of Christmas, you get to open your toy. Now you get to see if you can make the toy work and go.
Yeah, and I want to take it at face value first. Just looking at the renderings and whatnot, I think none of us knew the scope of the project. We didn't know exactly that they were going to build a hole in the Alamodome. You know, it was just like the artist rendering definitely takes you aback. When you look at the projects by themselves, all of them make sense separately. But my question to the mayor today was, why did we have to do all these together? Why were you waiting till now to unveil everything? And it was mainly, the answer was, we wanted everyone to see the vision. The vision for what San Antonio not is, but can be. And it's one of the most historic cities in the Union. It's one of the most populated cities in the country. And I don't think anybody really looks at San Antonio that way. There's a reason that we're not a top 30 media market. It's because we don't have some of these things. So when you put the vision together, it makes a lot of sense. When you really start to delve into it and ask yourself, how does this get done? I think that's where some of the minutia, and you start losing some people, is it the Spurs arena that's done first? Is it the convention center that's done first? Is it the Alamodome? How do you shut down 281 and 37 right there to build this land bridge that goes over the top and connects the two? It's all of those things that I think are still being lost in the shuffle.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, it's the convention center first.
Yeah, and that's what Eric said today. Eric Walsh said that.
And it's
that's
the Spurs arena second. And the dome is a long-term, and the land bridge is a long-term.
5 to 15 years for that done.
Yeah.
For that to be done is what they said.
But here's the thing. I think I talked to Derek Fox about this a few days ago. And Derek
Fox is who?
Is the chairman of the Alamo Bowl.
Thank you.
And has been for 30 years almost. And Derek's thing was, we did our own study with Populous, the same group that did this study and these renderings. And they kept telling us, go bigger, go bigger, go bigger. And go bolder and do it all at once. You get one shot at this, put it all together, and ask for the thing. Now, here's the other thing. UTSA, the city, the Spurs, the county, the taxpayer, all have to be on the same
Sympathetic
page.
on that.
And I think that's what Eric wants is this memorandum of understanding. And Spurs are in. We saw their statement today. The county's not in yet. Peter Sakai seemed caught off guard by it.
Yeah, we're going to get to that in a second.
There's no, who cares, right? I mean, the county got the AT&T Center and the city didn't matter. I don't know that the county has to be involved in some of this. Some of it, yes, some of it, no. And again, they made one thing perfectly clear today. The Spurs arena will not be paid for by city citizen
by taxpayers.
Tax
That's one thing I wanted to get into too. Is that was abundantly clear. They said that multiple times that the $1.2 billion or however much the Spurs arena costs, that will not come from, at least today, as we sit here currently. That is not the plan. Is to have that come from that. But they did say the infrastructure around it, the land bridge, the parking lots,
highways,
everything else that comes along next to it. So
it's a semantics thing.
So it's a semantics thing. Maybe not the brick that builds the Spurs arena won't come from the taxpayer, but the pavement that goes around the Spurs arena, that could be from the taxpayer. So that was a semantics thing kind of.
And one thing that they didn't talk about at all was the Spurs contribution today, which I found odd because I think both the Spurs would come in with a lower number than the city, but I do think they're expecting the Spurs to pay upwards of $500 million for their portion. I think the Spurs were coming in maybe thinking we'll pay $250. And I think there's a lot of negotiating to go on between now and then. But the Spurs are going to put in a considerable chunk for their portion of the arena.
And they've also gathered different investors to help bolster their financial portfolio as well. So it's almost like they've been not saving for this, but looking forward to something of this nature. But that's one of the main questions I think we all have is, how does it get paid for? We saw a whole slide, a whole presentation on the avenues that they can go down to kind of pay for this thing, just running through them quickly. It's general obligation bonds, hotel occupancy taxes. I wrote them down because there's no way I was going to remember this. Bexar County venue tax, increases in property tax revenue from tax increment reinvestment zone, tax credits, private development, philanthropy, financing zones. It's a bunch of stuff that I'm not smart enough to understand, but it's a lot of stuff that they haven't worked out yet either. The feasibility studies aren't done. The funding models aren't done. The designs for these buildings aren't done. The whole kind of rendering that we saw, that's not going to be how this ultimately ends up
True.
looking like. It's literally really just for everyone's mind. Like, this is what we're thinking. And so there's so much other work that needs to be done that all of the blow up in this right now is kind of confusing just because we're now seeing it for the first time. I think that's why everyone's reacting to it. But there's so much other work that needs to be done on this, Chuck.
Well, indeed. I mean, obviously some of this, including details, was news to a lot of us yesterday when we were hearing some of the details. I mean, the fact to me that the Alamodome is such a huge component in the overall price tag for all of this. I mean, the way it was told to me is that the Spurs arena and all the renovations that are supposed to be done to the Alamodome, which include gutting the entire inside, leaving the outside structure intact, and then redoing the parking lots. But that's $2.6 billion of the overall price tag just for the Alamodome and the proposed Spurs arena alone. So, again, there are so many moving parts. Matt, my concern with all of this is because all of this is so new and not really being able to, I feel like, weigh in on one side or the other because of there so many nebulous things or moving parts that we don't have any idea are in play here. And then how quickly do they take, if there is going to be an ask, which I am going to assume that there will be at some point, that they're going to have to take this to the taxpayer, how quickly is this going to end up on a ballot? And then it's up to the Bexar County voters to decide if they're going to fund this or not. And from what I'm hearing, it's the infrastructure, or is what they're calling it. From what I understand, the move as we sit here today is to try to get this on the May ballot. So this is coming quickly. And so I think it's up to all of us to try to figure out, okay, how best do we get more information? What does this look like? And then give it to the public so that they can make a good decision when they go, if they have to go to the ballot box as early as May.
Eric said something to that effect, though. The work starts tomorrow on finding funding sources and continuing the feasibility studies and all that stuff. So, Don, I know you have a take on that.
I don't, until we know what funding models will be used, I don't know that there will be an ask from the public with a ballot initiative yet. Like the TERS tax. You don't go to the voters for that. You just do it.
Lori Houston brought that up today, that if it does get to that point, they will go to the...
I don't know if it'll be May, though, because they said the pieces of it are going to... They're going to bring...
So you're talking about infrastructure.
Yes, but I mean, you're going to, whether you call it infrastructure or whether it's technically building the buildings or not, there's going to be an ask, that's the belief, at some point to go to the taxpayers. Right. What that figure looks like, if it's a half cent tax, a quarter cent, I don't know, whatever that is, there's going to be something on a ballot that asks the voting public to support this $3 to $4 billion project.
And how do you think that will be perceived?
I don't know.
I mean, you've seen the dome be built. You've seen AT&T Center be built.
I don't think they're going to ask for a tax to be. I don't think they're going to go to the voter for a ballot to support a $3 or $4 billion project, because it's 9 different projects. The voter might be asked to support the Alamodome in 15 years or in 10 years, but they're not going to be asked to support the Spurs arena.
Well, that was what I was going to say, is they made it clear today as well that they're going to come, as each feasibility study is done for each project, they're going to come back to the council and they're going to show everybody what those things were. How much is it going to cost? How is this going to be done? And they're going to figure out the cost or the funding models at that point. So for the convention center's first. December 4th is when we're going to figure out the convention center, what the feasibility study is for that, how much that's going to cost, all of those things. We're going to figure that out December 4th.
Do you think they asked for this whole thing?
They're not going to ask. They're not going to.
No, but do you think they pitched this whole thing to just hope to get one part of it or 2 parts of it?
Maybe they did. Maybe all 9 parts don't end up getting done. Maybe they aren't able to
I bet they don't.
do the auditorium. Or
I bet right now that all 9 parts don't get done.
Maybe they don't. I think the major ones, like you said before, Spurs Arena, land bridge to connect those 2 things, I think is a huge one. The Alamodome is one, because they're not getting bub kiss if they don't do something with the Alamodome in the convention center. The hotel, I don't know if that's going to be a thing that they end up doing. The UTSA Health Services Center, Health Science Center, whatever that ended up being, that
hospitality.
I think will end up being done, because ITC belongs to UTSA, and they're
True.
not, and the city ain't getting it unless UTSA
True.
gets their back scratched too.
Yeah.
So
That's their trade-off.
I don't know how to answer your question though about, what do I think the taxpayer is going to do? I mean, it's hard to know, right? In 99, when they were pushing this, there were a lot of elements in play. I mean, the Spurs, although they weren't making it public that this was going to happen, they were going to move if they didn't get a new building.
Right.
That was what was going to happen. There were 7 cities that were on the table that were willing to bring them in and make them a part of their community. The Spurs did not ever play that card publicly, and I credit them for that. Instead, they went out and won a championship, and I don't remember there being any pushback at all. Now, I'm not saying that my scope or my bubble is,
No, that thing passed overwhelming.
I mean, it was, why would you want your team to, and I remember telling people at the time, look, here's the way I'm not telling you to vote one way or the other. It's just as simple as this. At the time, I don't know that this is the case now, but at the time, if you want the Spurs to stay here, you vote for this. If you don't want them to stay here and you don't care, it doesn't affect you one way or the other, then vote against it. But yeah, that was an easy win. This one, I'm not sure because, again, if you look at the last 6 voting cycles, and almost every single proposition has been won,
In favor,
except for defund the police a couple of years ago, which narrowly lost here by 3,000 votes. So the appetite for more
things.
yes, in San Antonio has been, in recent history, to vote these things through. So I don't blame this entity, Spurs, City, everybody. If the goal is to get this on a ballot as quick as possible, I mean, that would be the thing to, where the trend has been for San Antonio.
Don, I want to ask you, I know you have to go soon. So 2 things I want to get with Don before he gets out of here.
Let me say this real fast when it comes to timing.
Real fast.
Do not think for one second that the drafting of Victor Wembanyama doesn't have anything to do with why we're talking about this now.
100%.
Okay.
There's just going to be detractors to this. I know you're very passionate that San Antonio needs this, that this is bringing San Antonio into the new age, the modern age, making them a more modern and futuristic city, all of that. There's going to be people who say, we don't need this. What happened to the Frostbank Center on the east side? Why wasn't it developed around that? Is the same thing going to happen here? What happened to development and everything, all the money that was supposed to go to the east side that didn't? Why do the Spurs need a new arena when it's 20 years old? Give me the 1 to 2 minute synopsis of why we need this, in your opinion.
20-year-old arenas are old arenas. Oklahoma City's is newer. They're getting a new one. Dallas has a newer one. They're getting a new casino one. You got to keep up or get dropped behind. Do you want to be Albuquerque? You want to be El Paso? Or do you want to be San Antonio, Dallas, Houston, these major markets that move progress forward? Do we absolutely need it? Of course not. Do you need an NBA basketball team? No. I mean, but do you want to live in a city where you have nice things, where you have good concerts, where you have Final Fours and you have the potential to have all-star games and a thriving NBA championship team? I do. I want to live in a city like that. I want to move forward. Austin's moved forward. Nashville's moved forward. We've moved forward. We've done okay. Howard Peak was the mayor when we didn't do what we should have done back in 99. Cindy Cryer saved us with the county. The only land they had was out there in the middle of undesirable neighborhood, I'll just say.
I mean, yeah, it's not the best part. It wasn't the best part.
Not the best part of town. And I don't think there was ever any intention of making that part of town.
Those were the promises made.
Yeah,
though.
that was definitely the promises
Those
made.
were the promises made. But I don't know that they were ever realistic. This isn't downtown. I mean, people make fun of us. People make fun of us when they come here. Well, the
Alamodome's ugly.
No, not the Alamodome. The Frostbank Center.
Yeah.
When they have to drive, when NBA teams have to stay downtown and they have to drive out to this barn in the middle of nowhere. When we're on national television and they're showing Philadelphia's skyline, then they come to San Antonio and they hover around the horse barns out in the middle of nowhere instead of our downtown skyline. I mean, this needs to be downtown. We need to correct the mistake that we made 20 years ago.
And the other thing I wanted to ask is, I had it on my paper here. Actually, do you have to go? 5:52, Don?
I can wait 3 more minutes.
All right. Let's take a couple viewer questions real quick then.
Overwhelmingly, the biggest question is parking. That's what everybody's asking about. I don't see any parking anywhere in this.
Hey, well, taxpayers are paying for the infrastructure.
Okay,
so
look just south. Look just south. Well done. Look just south of the Alamodome. Go over there, right where the Sneakers and Cleats logo is in the right-hand corner. And you'll see right there at the very corner, you'll see grass at the top, but there's about a 7-story garage right there. Parking garage in the South Dome right there.
Yeah, but if you're going somewhere, the Spurs arena or the new auditorium, anything like that they're building.
That's what the land bridge is for.
It's going to be a lot of walking for some people.
It's not too far.
All right.
I walked further to the Elton John concert, I'll tell you that.
Anything else for right now, Bob?
People are mentioning missions baseball, and so can you
totally different deal?
Yeah, can you explain what the difference is there and what's
totally different deal? Totally different ownership group. Totally different funding model. It's going through the TERS tax. Not related to this whatsoever.
I mean,
there are some carryovers between some of the owners.
But there's also there's also some disdain, I'll just say, between how the council got railroaded into the missions thing and how this one is being presented. This one has obviously gotten a lot of work done on it so far in the 2 years, the 18 months that it's been going on. But there's also some, ill will from the council.
Yeah, I could see some of that too, right?
Don, have a good show.
Are you out?
Peace out. Yeah, okay. I'm glad you're getting rid of me before I have to start talking about soap factory residents and upset renters. Renters.
Well, they're going to be okay.
Goodbye, Don Harris.
We'll save
I've
that topic for
got
another
him
day.
out of here before he started talking about that too.
But yeah, so we were talking about earlier today. I think both of us were caught by surprise when we heard the news that Peter Sakai and Bear County wasn't informed on any of that. That's a little
let me give the background on that one real quick.
Okay.
So I went into council at SR. Our old friend Jim Lefkoe used to be a News 4 Fox SA reporter. He works for Peter Sakai now, the county judge. And I was like, hey, have you guys talked to the county? All that stuff. There's like, we didn't know anything until the press briefing yesterday, which was embargoed till 10:30 today. He and his team. And I hope I'm not breaking any trust between Jim Lefkoe and I now, because he then told Jay Avila that as well. So I don't think I'm breaking any bridges here, but he did not know anything until they met with 2 members of the press after that briefing. And so the fact that there is this sense of not disdain, but I don't even know the word I'm looking for here, that they're not working together. They're not pulling on the same rope in the same direction at the moment, and they being the city and the county. And you need both of those factions pulling on the same rope in the same direction at the same time for this to work.
I think so too, because, again, this goes back to your question earlier when you asked me, how do I think voters are going to feel about this? I honestly don't know, because here's some of the things that are going through my mind right now. So if we're led to, let me say this. If I'm led to believe that there's going to be a push to get this on a May ballot, and I'm pretty sure that as we sit here today, that is the plan. Well, guess what else is going to be on the May ballot at that time?
The mayoral race.
And all the city council races. So what kind of position is that going to put people running for office when this could be a very hot buttony issue when we get closer to whatever it is that's going to happen? So, I don't know, man. There is just so much I'm willing to learn and listen to try to figure out how best to take all this in. Where's the vision? Who stands to benefit from all this? Not just the consumer, obviously, that's paying ticket prices to go watch a concert or a ball game, but like who is making the money long-term out of all this? There's just a lot of questions I have. The infrastructure, how is that ultimately going to get paid for, right? Well, they've been on the record saying that if it comes to that, then they would have to go to the taxpayers to get the funding.
Speaking to what Luis just popped up, you see kind of everything that is planned here in the timeline for it. 1 to 5 years, that's basically everything that's outside of the Alamodome, the parking lot over there, the public spaces over there on the east side. The Alamodome is an undertaking. Like, It's a severely outdated. They called it a dinosaur today. I'm not speaking out of turn here. Literally, the people who own the Alamodome called it a dinosaur. So it definitely has to be remodeled. It has to be reconfigured. If you want more Final Fours here, if you want the college football playoff here, World Cup matches, potentially more. What am I looking for? NBA All-Star games. If you want these types of events here, you need to be able to renovate the Alamodome, because I don't think anyone's in favor of tearing it down and rebuilding. So you have to figure out ways to update all of this stuff. What's on the other side of the highway is stuff that's going to be done sooner rather than later. A new Spurs arena, I feel pretty confident in saying this, is going to come to downtown San Antonio, or the Spurs will not be here forever. Sorry, I'm hitting the table, and Luis is telling me not to hit the table. But
again, I don't know long term. Again, I haven't heard any talk at all about, the Spurs wielding their might in any of this in terms of publicly, like, build this or we will leave.
I don't know if they're wielding their might, but it's definitely a public sentiment.
They have leverage. There's no question, because they are only one of a handful of teams that call themselves NBA teams, right? Or entities that call themselves NBA teams. I don't know. This is a lot of money, right? I mean, if you're thinking about $2.6 billion of the overall price tag for a new Spurs arena, and I'll play it differently. I didn't think there was anything wrong with the AT&T Center when it was built. I didn't think that it was, a pain getting there, or, just when I'm coming down 281 to just take the 35 North, easy in, easy out.
But there's no restaurants around it. There's
correct.
no entertainment
I didn't know that
around
was
it.
going to happen over time, that
you look
there
at it
really
now.
wouldn't be any development. But, there's a lot of places in town where you could say that.
Right.
So, again, I'm all for progress. I'm all for thinking big and moving us in the direction of taking us from where we are now to somewhere else. I think the fascinating thing for me is that in other cities, it's been my observation that if you have Fortune 5 companies, and a lot of them, Fortune 500 companies, that stuff like this comes with that, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, this is the stuff that you get to go along with it, And sometimes, though, is it going to be a case now where sports and entertainment is what's driving Fortune 500 companies to come to your city? I don't know. I don't know how this, I'm not much of a, city planner or a visionary to know, or a data analyst that can look at these things and go, if we build this, we'll start getting all these other things. I just don't know that we're in a position to make that assessment.
Two quick things, and we'll get to some more viewer questions, and then we will get out of here. During the press conference today, they were asked two questions I thought was interesting. What if with all these feasibility studies, with all the intrigue and stuff that they're putting into this, what if something's not feasible? We're going to have to see that. If something is not physically and feasibly able to be done, we're going to have to, we being the city, is going to have to take a look at that and be like, okay, maybe we can't do this one of the 9 things on our to-do list. That's going to have to be talked about at some point. They were also asked, they being Eric Walsh, Lori Houston, and Ron Nirenberg, were also asked, their timeline that they put out had construction finishing on the Spurs arena at the end of, I think it was the second quarter of 2028. They were asked by the San Antonio Express news reporter, does that mean you guys expect the Spurs to move downtown before their lease is up in 2032 from the AT&T Center? They did not have an answer for that.
Well, that's a damn fine question, whoever asked that, because, that stands out like a sore thumb, right?
I have her name right here. I lost it. I think it's Madison Eisler. But it's a good question.
She's done a good job.
She's done a very good job in
reporting this every step of the way, in my opinion.
But it's very interesting to think that, like, if this is done in 2029 and 2030, are they going to then break that lease, and then it's even more ill will with the county? So that's just another
right.
factor
I saw
here.
some things today where there are some concerns about what to do then with the Frost Bank Center at this
year-round
point.
rodeo, baby.
All for that too, man. I did the rodeo for the first time this year. I thought it was really cool.
Year-round rodeo. Here we go.
But so, again, there's so many moving parts, right? I just don't know how to come down on one side or the other at this point, when I feel like I'm in a fact gathering mission at this point to try to take it all in, see where we go from here, and then see what it ends up looking like.
Bob?
We got David Smith, who said, surely there's something better to do with this money. With a mediocre basketball team in a minor league baseball team.
To be fair,
not much of a vision.
To be fair, in a couple of years, I think we're all hopeful the Spurs aren't a mediocre basketball team.
Right, but I mean, to the viewer's point, that's going to be part of the struggle, I would believe, if you have to go to the taxpayers at some point, because it's like, well, we need more police, we need more firefighters, we need teacher raises. Yes, there are things that we need to make our city a better, safer place, whatever the case may be. But I don't know that you can't have both things in this regard. I don't know that you could say, well, we just are going to focus in on this. Maybe this is part of the discussion with how other things get done too. I don't know at this point.
To that end as well, these two items, the Alamodome, and the Spurs Arena are being used as anchors for a bigger project. This is all the convention center is going to get done first. They need to redo the convention center. They've lost out on $500 million or somewhere thereof in conventions and money coming from the people who would have spent that money in San Antonio because they weren't able to get the international car shows and the other things of that nature. So they need to expand the convention center first to gather some of that money. That would then, in turn, go to help pay off some of the other things. That's one of the things that's going to be done first. People need to stop looking at just a Spurs Arena, just an Alamodome reconfiguration. It's a new hotel. It's a expanded convention center. It's a new concert venue down the street at the old courthouse.
Yeah.
It's all of these things that will build money. It's not just a Spurs Arena, even though that is one of the anchors.
So I would play devil's advocate on some of this. Like, if you've gone downtown and just tried to hang out for a night and how expensive it is to park and how dirty it is and it's not kept up. I mean, so some of this the city can pawn off and say, well, this isn't happening because this isn't happening. Well, we've got some, I think, bigger struggles ahead in terms of cleaning ourselves up a little bit, so to speak, on what's going on downtown before we bring in some of this other stuff. But again, maybe that's part of the broader overall conversation to all this. I mean, there's certainly a lot of issues downtown, and I don't know, the city being able to say, well, we've lost out on all this. It's like, well, maybe if you worked on some of these other things too, you wouldn't have lost out on any of this stuff. I mean, there's a long way to go with, getting this city back on its feet, so to speak.
Bob?
Guillermo says, renovate the dome to bid for an MLB team. We are big enough
in the dome.
Let's swing for the fences.
Well,
Pun intended.
I'm with
That's got
Guillermo.
Chuck's heart right there.
Yeah, it does, but I mean that's part of my thought process all along with building the Missions Stadium. It's the Rays and the A's are both waiting
to be had. Yeah, not the A's
out
anymore.
there. Really. Well, I mean, there's still no concrete plans for anything with them. We don't even know if they're ultimately going to end up in Vegas at this point.
They're
honestly.
building the arena right now.
Dude, we don't know for certain that's what's going to happen in 3 or 4 years. I'm telling you, that is a quagmire that is still left. The final story has not been written on that.
Yeah, but to a different point though, they wouldn't play at the Alamodome.
No. Probably not. I mean, there might be a way that you could probably figure out a way to make it turn it into a baseball stadium. They did. They played exhibition games there, and it was, kind of cartoonish. They had 260-foot fences and
It's
right center field. But be that as it may, like if you gutted the inside, again, I mean, I don't know why we aren't thinking big there either. But again, part of me is there's the thought of because the Rays and the A's are available, how come somebody else isn't going out there and trying to bring them in too? Like there's a reason why. Does somebody want 80 some odd dates a year in their building filled up? I mean, those are all considerations that you have to consider when you're bringing in a Major League Baseball team. So I don't know, man. It's
a few commenters have chimed in with they need a casino down there, and I think looking forward to what's every state's going to have casinos eventually. And
dude, as long as Dan Patrick's in office, we ain't getting jack crap.
Well, this ain't going to be done till 2029, so
yeah, but he has to be. Yeah, don't even get me started on that one. Dan Patrick and the way that the legislature polices the way people spend their money and enjoy their time is something else.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, there's a whole other side to that too, and
that's a whole other podcast in and of itself.
It is. I mean, because there is another side, and there's a reason why some of these things haven't come here.
Yeah. Anything else, Bob?
That's good.
All right. Well, thank you so much to everybody for tuning in to the special edition of the Sneakers and Cleats podcast. It's obviously been a kind of a crazy day. to kind of see everything and learn everything that they've been planning now for the last 16, 18 months. It's going to be a crazy, next couple of years, next couple of months, as well as we continue to get these feasibility studies in. We'll keep talking about it here. The Spurs are one of our main topics here on the Sneakers and Cleats podcast, and so we'll keep talking about their new home potentially. Speaking of the Spurs, I believe they tip off here in about an hour and a half, so we'll see if they can exact some vengeance on the Jazz without Victor Wembanyama, but we'll be back to talk about all of it on Monday right here, Sneakers and Cleats podcast. See you then.